Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel, The Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. I am here with Harry LaFontaine, and we are here actually discussing his new YouTube channel. He finally went for it, and he's going to be doing some awesome work. And this is all so y'all can get to know him, get to know me a little bit, and know about his channel. So that part is finally over. So now we can just get back to talking. So what's your favorite subject when it comes to history?
Ooh, that is a loaded question.
Oh yeah.
There are many. I admire heroes, sort of, in a sense, like sort of just the juggernauts of history, really. And what I like to do is I learn as much about those people and their families as I possibly can. And I have a natural psychoanalytical approach to people and behavior. So my work with history is sort of like a double-sided sword. I'm looking at the material, I'm reading everything, I'm absorbing as much as possible, while simultaneously my mind is working to figure out why these people are behaving the way they are in a more like practical sense.
So you'd have a field day with Caligula.
Yes.
No, absolutely.
That's what led me to Constantine with my first series, because I've always been super fascinated with just him in general and with the Romanization of Christianity. I call it that rather than the Christianization of Rome. I feel like that's backwards.
No, I agree. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And so when I sat there for a minute and I really just thought really hard to myself, like if I was going to actually do a lecture series, like if I was going to teach at a school and I had to pick my own topic, and I was going to take that approach of we have history on one side and we have the psychoanalysis on the other side. What am I not only most familiar with, but most interested in? And Constantine just popped because I've just always been super fascinated by his whole story and how it's paralleled to the Romanization of Christianity. Is just compelling to me.
Oh yeah, and now you're doing an entire series on him, and so in like the times that he lived in and stuff like that. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you want to do with that series.
Well, the series is going to capture everything from like really like the start of the crisis of the 3rd century. It kind of has to start there because it describes the world in which Constantine was born into. Oh, wow. And then from the time of his birth, which is in modern-day Serbia, I think it was Dacia or Upper Moesia at the time, a city called Nisus at that time, which is now Nice, Serbia. That place was pretty war-torn, and his father had been there to deal with some different revolts. I think it was the Goths and the Carpi, if I'm right. And he put that down with Aurelian, and then Constantine was born in 272. Into this war-torn world, to this ambitious general of a father, and we all know who his mother was and turned out to be Saint Helena. And so I am going to take that and the lives of those people, how the places they lived in were in terms of their the religious demography of those places, and really just the local landscape. And who they would have been familiar with and what their lives would have been like, and how that ultimately led to the big picture in the long run of what we saw upon Constantius's death, and then Constantine, slowly working his way east and ultimately unifying the empire, and what tools would have been at his disposal in terms of the social side of everything, and how his great familiarity with all these different geographic areas would have allowed him to ultimately be ambiguous in his approach and to be specific to each area, so that the further he went along in that, the more different sort of like alter egos of himself would have been in place, to where he was ultimately able to unify this massive population across this gigantic landmass. And that's the whole thing.
Oh yeah, and just so y'all know, his first episode is already up. It's basically like an introduction to the series, and he kind of gets on. And you actually, I believe you kind of started around the 3rd century crisis, didn't you? Because you brought up that, and I do like one point that you made, and that is the more of a lasting impact that Diocletian actually had on, especially not just the modern world, but in a way, I like how he almost created the foundations of medieval feudalism without even really thinking about it. It's one of those things like fathers have to teach their occupations to their sons. They basically can't leave. I found that to be fascinating. The History of the Papacy podcast did a 2-part series on the economic reforms of Diocletian,
Yeah,
which is
I watched that.
pretty interesting. I was going to say, he's also been a subscriber to the channel for, it's been a while, I feel like. I'm not sure how long, though. It's been, how long would you say?
At least a year and a half.
Oh, yeah. He's literally put up with me for that long. That's probably like 85% better than most people. So I know. Oh, my God. Oh, YouTube. So how thick is your skin? I got to warn you ahead of time. Those YouTube comments will get surreal the more popular that you get.
Well, it's very thick because I worked in leadership for most of my life, even going back into my late adolescence. And as my life went along, I spent a little bit of time in the military. And then, like I said in the intro to the channel video, I spent about 2 decades working in the restaurant industry. And I worked my way up to a position called operations director, and we were developing new franchise restaurants. So we went from having 1 restaurant in 2011 up to having a total of 7 restaurants in 3 different markets by the time I ended up going down with a knee surgery last year. So I built a huge network doing that, and I was directly responsible for somewhere around 100 people in 4 restaurants. So yeah, my skin's plenty thick. I've heard things that I took personally, and I was able to handle it, and nothing in the virtual world am I going to take too personally, so I think I'll be all right. And I wanted to make another point about Constantine that you said, the foundations of feudalism, and something I find ironic and a little bit humorous is when he split the provinces apart to create the dioceses.
Yeah.
And he's also guilty of persecutions. Then the Catholic Church used the diocese and still uses them today for their bishoprics.
Absolutely.
I just find that kind of funny.
So in short, you and your expertise in like centralization, consolidation of power, how to use numbers and stuff like that probably play into quite a bit of your fascination with certain historical characters, I would imagine, correct?
They absolutely do. Yeah, especially when things go from one point to another in terms of growth, and kind of like just my own personal understanding of kind of how you have to be as you could just call them different units, provinces, whatever. And when you're dealing with you have this group of people, that group of people, this group of people, that group of people, and so you've got to represent yourself in a way to each group of people that is going to make it so that they're ready, willing, and able to follow you with a positive mind. You know, it's not from a tyrannical standpoint, like from leadership standpoint. Like there's good leaders and great leaders, and I'm really not interested in good leaders. Good leaders are the kind of people who treat every single person the same way and have, you know, they don't adjust themselves according to situations. I've always known that for every single person that I lead, I need to have a specific leadership style for that person.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then when you start having teams of people, now you've got so many different leadership styles and stuff in place. I mean, to balance all that, it takes a great deal of care.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So what branch were you in?
I was in the U.S. Army, military police.
U.S. Army. See, that's another reason why y'all should watch his channel. A veteran that also teaches history. It's almost literally, if you're in the U.S., it's your patriotic duty to watch his channel. There we go. You got to support your fellow veterans, people. But no, that's awesome, man. So what do you do now? Just basically focusing on the channel and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm focusing on the channel right now. I did have a little bit of a setback with my knee that I had surgery on, and actually like in a failed attempt to get back to what I was doing in the restaurant industry before. And with that setback, I realized that my body's not going to hold up to that kind of life anymore. Like, I'm not frail by any means, but I can't walk 100 miles a week.
Yeah,
you know?
no way, man.
Do it. And so I've always, well, not always, but for many years, I've been really interested in what it would take to be able to teach people history. And so now I have sort of a platform and a moment in time where if I utilize the resources available to me and I build a strong network of people and I do my best work, then I could I could make a sustainable living teaching people history. So that's sustaining a life doing something that you love is all I really need. I'm not a materialistic guy. I don't plan on getting rich, or I don't have any lofty ideas like that. But as long as I can eat and drink and have the internet and a smile on my face, I am thrilled.
No, that's great, dude. Yeah, I'm the same way, man. My goal is to one day be able to work at least only part-time. I still want to work at least part-time somewhere. It's good for your social skills, gives you kind of a social life. And so, I mean, but my goal is to eventually only work part-time. And I think within about less than a year, I will finally be there. And oh my God, it'll be amazing to only work part-time. I've always been envious of some of the younger guys that I work with that work like 2 to 3 days a week. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how y'all do it.
Yeah. Yeah, this has
So
definitely been a strange experience for me, just being out, because the full-time work when you're managing multiple restaurants, I mean, it ranges from anywhere from 50 to 80 hours a week, but you're on call 24/7. You never know what's going to happen. So
I believe that.
To like get to the point where I'm just like kind of clear of it's maddeningly boring. But I'm trying to find the best ways to occupy my time, and this is it. And I have a close relationship with the master teacher for the humanities at Cleveland State University. She was actually my homeroom teacher and English teacher through high school. So I've been talking to her, and she is very interested in taking a look at my skill set and seeing if there's any way that she can kind of wiggle me into the real, true academic world, even though I've got nothing more than a GED. She says there's ways, and so I'm very interested in that, of course.
No, absolutely. That'd be absolutely phenomenal. Plus, I mean, that's another thing too, having a YouTube channel like what you've got, the interview potential you would have would be pretty much boundless. And that's actually one thing I'm starting to do. I'm starting to pester my local universities for like their leading experts in world history, European history, the Crusades, the Inquisition, like Judaica Hebrew studies. I mean, that's nothing but untapped potential, man. And you could do a whole episode of just a single interview, especially, and I've actually been encouraging some of the podcasts that I work with, whenever they interview guests, to actually record the footage of them talking. That's always a plus. People are more inclined to watch a interview between two people than just hearing the voice. And I think that's one thing I want to try to strive for as well, is basically doing the same thing. But no, that's great, man. So let's see here. And I'll edit out this pause. So
that's something I've been doing is I have friends all over the place. I'm a military guy. I've always been a really strong networker, and I have a friend actually who lives in West Virginia. His name's Clinton Clay, and he is extremely well versed in the War of the Roses and the 100 Years' War and the Protestant Reformation. And he's also just like a part-time manager at a Little Caesars, but he just knows everything about this stuff. So like he was very interested in getting me to interview him just about the War of the Roses, just so he could get on the channel. And I thought that's a pretty neat idea. So I love your idea about reaching out to the local academics. And then I mean, kind of like what we're doing here. We're just an amateur reaching out to another amateur, really.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. That's one thing I always tell people, because, oh my God, I got an email the other day like, hey, I want to interview you for my channel. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a debate, actually, because I could tell by the email. I'm like, okay, I was like, I know what this is. They're wanting to get me, because it deals with the my posts and videos relating to race and ethnicity in the ancient world. And so as soon as I saw that email and who it was from, I was like, oh God, I was like, this is going to be the debate of the century for YouTube. But man, I did what I'm famous for. I completely lost track of where I was going with that.
Well, I watched the one where you interviewed the guy on Egyptian.
Oh, Kulu. Yeah, Kulu. Yeah,
that was something. It took, I know I made a couple comments, but it took a great deal of restraint for me to just kind of stay above board with it. Because all the love in the world to the man, but faith is a funny thing. The definition of faith is belief in the absence of evidence.
Yep.
Well, we have evidence, archaeologically and written. And so like cognitive dissonance is something that I'm just not very attracted to.
Yeah, no, I agree. He currently hates me. I think he finally blocked me after our last historical debate. But that's one thing I want to do, especially when I have people on my channel. I want it to be more of a discussion. I don't want it to really be a debate. I feel like debates get carried away, people get heated, and then just ends dialogue, you know?
Mhm.
And the comments were crazy on just the discussion video, so I can only imagine how wild they would get if we actually had a real debate, you know? So,
Yeah,
oh
I'm gonna have
God,
to go
kills
back
me.
and look at my comments on that one.
Oh yeah, no, man. Oh, it's still getting comments too. It cracks me
I
up.
bet.
Oh God. But yeah, no. So what kind of movies you like? What kind of historical films do you like? What's your jam?
I don't watch much TV at all. I think my favorite thing ever on TV was the HBO series Rome.
Yep.
I loved Troy, of course. I
Of
love
course.
Gladiator. Even with the historical inaccuracies, I don't mind. It's a great production, great fight scenes, and all that good stuff. Russell Crowe's obviously fantastic. My favorite character in Rome was the older version of Octavian.
Yeah.
And my favorite scene in Rome was when he addressed the Senate, and Cicero comes up to him and he says, "My dear boy, this is not what we discussed." And he says, "It is not. Yet here we are."
Yeah, I
And
love that.
it just seems so Augustan to me.
It's been so long since I've watched that. I need to actually sit down and just rewatch the whole city or the whole series. I'm pretty sure, wasn't it the Brawler? The Brawler, isn't it, is it Varenus? He's the
Varenus
bigger bald headed
is
guy
the
that's
blonde
always getting
guy,
in trouble.
and
Yeah. He's
Pollo's the
gotta be
bigger
my
one.
favorite. He's got to
Varenus,
yeah, he's got to be my favorite. That scene when he bites out that dude's tongue at that gang fight, because at this moment, the other guy, isn't it Polo? Paulo?
yeah, Titus Pollo.
Yeah, he's out of the picture right now due to what he's going through. And so he gives this guy his total control over their organized crime. That's one thing I loved about Rome is it focused on organized crime and criminal violence in ancient Rome, especially over the docks and I think like the Aventine Wars and stuff like that. And so that's one thing I loved about that show is that it presented a historical aspect that's really not in a lot of things. But when he walks up and just bites out that guy's tongue, oh my God, that's got to be one of the best chilling scenes I've ever seen when it comes to history. I love it. But no,
Yeah,
I try not to get too picky. Like some people go overboard critiquing historical films. Honestly, I'm just happy to have it. Really.
sure, me too. And the one thing I do go a little bit overboard on, which is not really directly related to history, because I'll still watch these films, but modern military movies
Yeah.
where they have uh, inaccuracies with rank and uniform and stuff like
Yeah.
that drives me insane.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
can
that hard.
imagine. I can
It's not that
absolutely
hard to get
imagine.
that right.
Yeah.
There are policies in place. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
it's not like reaching back in history and forming an opinion on something and trying to make a movie about it. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
here's the manual.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can
Put the shit
literally
out.
download the
Pardon
PDF.
my language there.
So hit me with a movie example like that. Hit me with that.
uh,
I know I put
there's
you on the
just so
spot.
many. Saving Private Ryan was actually great when it came to that. I don't watch many movies. I'm trying to think of some that have inaccuracies that really drove me bonkers. I can't think of any off the top of my
Oh,
head.
you're good. I will say, have you seen that Tom Hanks is producing? I think also with Spielberg a D-Day movie.
No.
It's going to be literally one giant Normandy scene, man. I'm wondering if
Hell
it's going to
yeah.
be kind of like the old John Wayne movie. Oh my God, my mind went blank. What is that? The Longest Day. Did you ever watch that? The old black and white. It's got like, I think it's got. Is Sean Connery in it? I think Sean Connery may be in that one. I could be wrong. I may be wrong, but John Wayne is one of the main characters. Of course he is. He's got like a 5 minute scene where he's like staring at the ocean, just talking. And that's when you're like, yeah, that's definitely John Wayne. They're needing that World War II propaganda.
But you know what I'm really looking forward to is the series that Michael Hurst and Martin Scorsese are going to be putting out called The Caesars. Uh,
Yes. Oh my God. I cannot wait. I'm wondering if they're going to do it like that. You remember I Claudius? Have you seen that?
I have not seen I Claudius. I've heard plenty
Ooh,
about it, but
you need
I can
to.
tell you that the Caesars is going to be similar to Mike Duncan's book, The Storm Before the Storm. It's going to be that
Yeah.
same kind of time frame. So Julius Caesar is going to be a young man starting out in the series of the Caesars. Um,
Yes.
and so it's going to go through the trials and times of his early life, I think starting as early as like 17, 18 years old.
So probably
And
around
so,
the time he was abducted by pirates, I would imagine.
yeah, a little bit before that, and
Yeah.
then through the conscription,
Oh man.
the prescription of what was that, Sulla?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he lucked out on that one. Sola, I like Sola. Sola gets hated on in pretty much every production he's ever been featured in. But and I've always and I love it when I say this because it's so controversial and people get really angry. I always say Caesar intentionally destroyed the Republic. Sola actually tried to save it. And I think that's one thing. If you ever watch the Great Courses on either Great Courses Plus or if you
yeah. I've watched a lot of those.
download them, which I
Yeah,
do not do. But
already.
they did quite a few lectures on Sola and how it really, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of assassinations that went on, property seizures, but at the end of the day, he really like he did not do what he could have done. I mean, he could have easily have declared himself as like the king. No one would have been able to really stop him at this point. I mean, he's completely consolidated his power, but in the end, everything transfers back to the way he thought it was supposed to be, which I always thought was very interesting because I don't know if I could do that if I was him. So
Yeah, it's
he's
very
obviously the bigger man.
yeah, it's very interesting to think about, and it's I mean, they all of those guys were really really inspired by Cincinnatus, and so anybody who could emulate him was going to be a hero and go down in time. And I think about like the Greek. I can't think of the word for it, but it's a big part of the Iliad and the Odyssey and the early Greek times in the like 7th and 6th century BC. I can't think of the word, but it's like the deeds you do in life that live on past your life. Like people were very attracted to that,
Oh
and they
yeah.
wanted to have like this. They wanted to be remembered like as nobly as possible
Oh
or
yeah.
in the
They're
best
like,
light as possible, and it's like
oh
a
yeah.
form of immortality. And
Oh
so
yeah.
like Cincinnatus, I think, did that for the Romans. And then what's funny is after that, then obviously we all know what Caesar did, and he did his thing. But then once Octavian came and then won his wars, and we got the empire started in 27 BC, and then he reigned for his 41 years ish. But after that, everyone was trying to emulate Augustus.
Oh yeah.
Cincinnatus was out of the picture until George Washington sailed across the Delaware.
Oh yeah.
Like,
No, that's true. It's funny how that all changes. That's actually one thing I'm obsessed with right now is studying kingship and like the art of divine rule, right? And so that's one thing I thought was interesting is like not just in the ancient world, but all the way up into the late Middle Ages, honestly, past that, through the Reformation, into modern history, the kingship is like the ability to rule well. But I'm also more fascinated with the divine aspects of that and how they go from certain pagan gods as being who they represent to eventually the monotheistic religions involving Christianity, Islam, Judaism. And so it's like the fact that, and this is interesting when you're also, because I love studying heresy,
yeah,
especially the Inquisition, and how
yes,
this the state represented by one man and in many cases one woman develops a complex that because of how they've been raised throughout their entire life that you are the mouthpiece of God, you are chosen by your God to rule by divine right. And so it creates this complex that, well, if you're questioning me, then you're questioning my God, because an attack on me is an attack on God. And it's interesting to see how that all fits together and what a hell of a power complex that has to create psychologically for people. I mean, I can't even imagine, which is
yeah,
like when you have the peasants revolt in England. Here is this king being told by these like people that he looks at as probably almost no better than animals, and he in his mind they're trying to tell him how to rule his kingdom, and it's like no wonder he had those guys executed and had all those peasants hunted down and killed and displayed throughout the countryside, because it's like when you have that complex, when you've been told your whole life that you are representing this and that you are in fact this, you start using the term we and us referring to not just you but the other. And so I mean, it's whenever that judgment is questioned, the results are going to be absolutely, I mean, in a sense of the word, biblical,
yeah,
as far as like
yeah,
retribution, like some Old Testament brutality. And I
yeah.
don't know, I've just always found it interesting. I'm trying to get through like, I think it's about 35 books right now on the subject, and it's going to be a while before I get through all of them because some of them are so dry, but they're good. They're good.
You know, I have some feedback for you on that. Is just to further go into it, and being raised with that idea that you are divine and you have the divine right to rule, and what that could do to you psychologically. There's like another wrinkle to that, is like, what is going on in the mind of someone who actually believes
Exactly.
that they are divine representative? Like, are you actually lying to yourself to such an extent that you believe what you're saying? If that's the case, it's unlikely that you should be managing much of anything.
Oh, right. No, I agree.
Other
I
than like
100%.
trips to the bathroom. But you
Oh,
might
yeah.
need help with the, you know.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true. And that's one thing I found interesting. Like, even if you took, I don't think atheistic is the right word, because I mean, I'm always open to people. I am an atheist, but I still love studying religion. And I think that's one thing I love about studying religion in general. Oh, you're an atheist too?
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same as you. I am an atheist,
Oh,
but I'm not militant. I used to be
yeah.
militant,
Same. Yeah.
but I just stopped 5, 6,
Yeah.
7 years ago, something like that. And now somehow, I was just telling my girlfriend this. I just suddenly I'm like a historian who has an absolute affinity for theology,
Oh, yeah.
and
No,
it doesn't even make any sense.
oh, yeah.
But
And I think that's
it's
one
what
thing
it
I
is.
love is that, like, I can sit down and look at the Crusades, and it irritates my friends to a certain extent, especially the ones who are religious. And it's because, like, I don't know. I don't see a victim unless you count like the common people who got caught up in the Crusades, in the jihads, because it's like, if you look at that and you try to throw your bias out the window, I look at all those different religions of the book as a complete equal. In a way, they're all Jewish heresies in their own way, y'all. Okay, I'm not calling you Jewish heretics. I'm just saying. But it's fascinating in the religious warfare and religious conquest. One of my favorite American scholars, who's used by the great courses constantly, is Kenneth W. Harl.
He's the best.
He is literally the best. If y'all haven't seen his stuff, some of his lectures are on YouTube. Almost all of them are going to be on Audible, the Great Courses Plus. You will never find a better scholar when it comes to teaching history, and occasionally he's really funny. But he pointed out the fact that if you believe it's his lecture series on the Crusades. If you believe there is a victim, really you're misinformed. And I'm paraphrasing what he said because he said it much longer. But the fact that the Byzantine Empire, eventually what we call Christendom, which is kind of a broad, controversial subject to still use, and Islam, all viewed religious warfare as a complete normality. Like, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is so atrocious, one side or the other. Like, these guys all looked at it as like, all right, next generation comes up, they're like, time for a jihad, time for a crusade. Yeah. It's literally a military family tradition. And you see that as certain nobles, their children go off and their children go off, and it just goes and never ends. And I mean, it's one conquest after another because they loved it. They lived for it. And honestly, I mean, if any of us, regardless of if you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Jews, I always feel bad, man. Those guys get caught in the middle of everything throughout ancient and medieval history. I always feel so bad. Like, it would absolutely suck to be Jewish in the Inquisition, the Crusades. I mean, the Roman conquest of Palestine. Like, oh my God.
There's so much. And to go back on what you were saying about the believing there's a victim or feeling like a victim is like something that people don't understand, especially people who don't really study history really at all, modern adults. They don't realize that not everybody could read the way they can now. So like all of these people that could be victimized, they don't even know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
they can't read any of this stuff. They don't know the technical differences between why this person's fighting this person over the same thing of Christianity or Judaism, the different heresies, however that stuff worked out. Like, these people are just trying to live their day-to-day lives. It's not like the modern society where every single person has an opinion, every single person can make their voice be heard in some way or another, on some platform or another, instantaneously. Back then, you were lucky if you could even read.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I always think it's funny when in medieval movies they depict like I'm going to go back to like a peasants' revolt and stuff like that. Like, you see it in the Tudors. You see these certain, they're not necessarily peasants. They're more of like the community leaders. Sure, you can look at them as like the lower class and stuff like that, but they've got half a brain. Usually they're a small business owner. and they're trying to get these peasants to rise up and take what's theirs. And you've always got those guys that are like, I really just don't want to be here and I don't care. So I'm going to go back over here and keep plowing my field and y'all just do your little thing. And it's like one smartest guy in the Middle Ages right there, and he doesn't even realize it because they're not going to win this. The French Revolution will change that later, but for now it's a lost cause. And so I always love those guys because they don't care. They just want to live their life. They want to have their days off. They want to attend their local feasts. They just want to live their little life. Unlike today, when everyone's got a cell phone, everyone wants to comment on this social issue or who banged who killed who, what we're doing in Syria, what we're not doing in Syria, stuff like that. People back then, man, the lower class, especially when you go, I always say like the lower class, sure, you've got peasants and people who run the local towns and villages, but like it would suck to be a serf. But like the lowest that you can go, those dudes don't care. Like they're bred to work. They're literally bred to reproduce more serfs. And it's like, at the end of the day, they're just living their life. And until an enemy raiding party shows up at the door, it's like just no one cares. And that's understandable. I love that. But yeah, everybody's got an opinion today, man. But that's history for you.
Definitely. I mean, it's a challenge to really look at not only everything that's going on in current events, because I will not talk about current events in any way, but people cannot look at things for what they are. They have to look at things through the lens of their beliefs. No matter what their beliefs are, you could be an atheist, you could be agnostic in some way or another, you could be a spiritual person, you could be a Christian, Islam, Buddhist, Hindu, any one of the above. And you're going to be really challenging yourself to look at the landscape of things minus that lens of who you are. Until you look at everything minus that lens of who you are, you're not looking at anything.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It's like some guys at work, they were talking about ancient Greece and Sparta, and I'm like working on the line. I'm just listening, just grinning, because they're like, yeah, man, I wish we could go. One was like, man, I wish I could live back then. That was like, men were men. And I just kept going on and going on. I was like, hey, you want to know what your history books probably let out? And he's like, what? I was like, Spartans? He's like, yeah. I was like, super gay. He's like, what? I was like, oh, yeah, bro. I was like, imagine marrying a woman who became a woman by participating in an orgy, usually by like a riverside or something like that. So Spartan society is super sexual. And I was like, but imagine her on her wedding night having to shave her head because you're going to have sex with her in the dark, typically, possibly even from behind. So it's as close to your military male partner as you can get. And then once you've consummated your marriage and you've done your Spartan duty to attempt to create more Spartans, then you go back to your probably much older military companion who is also your same sex. Mm-hmm. And they just looked at me like, what? Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, you have no idea. And I was like, it's just pedophilia in ancient Greek culture is horrific. I mean, oh, my God.
When you go back to work, if you can find a way to get that conversation started up again, make sure to mention the communal wives.
Oh, God.
And how that went down. It's like the contention that is on the inner, like just the inner contention of a person in modern society even thinking of something like that. It's completely ass backwards because people know that there were men in history and there still are men today that have multiple wives. Yeah, that's not alarming. But if you reverse that scenario, it is a major
crazy.
Yeah, and it just blows people's minds.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, it cracks me up. Oh, man. And it's, oh, yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Which is actually, speaking of like pedestry or even like pedophilia in ancient Greece and stuff like that, I was watching a documentary. Y'all should check it out. It's called The History of Syphilis. And it focuses on the ancient and Middle Ages. Apparently, there was a theory in history and historiography that apparently I've missed this whole time. But I guess historians through the 18th and 19th and early 20th century thought that syphilis came to the old world from the new world. I didn't even know that. So I guess it was like they tried to, it's the natives' fault, or it's the indigenous people's fault that syphilis came back to Europe. I had never heard that before until watching this documentary, which has one historian debating that stance, like that's what he's pushing. And then these people are like, no, according to archaeological evidence, syphilis goes back way before ancient Greece in European history. And so I'd always thought that syphilis was global. I mean, I've always thought that's something you can get regardless of where you're at. But apparently there was a trend of thought that syphilis came to Europe from the New World. And it blew me away because I had no idea. And I'm like, so what did you guys think was going on before the conquest of the Americas? But one thing I thought was horrific and just disturbing from a modern perspective is that a lot of the children that they have been excavating, they show signs of syphilis. This is throughout ancient Greece, but also a medieval monastery in England. I think they said out of all the bodies they excavated, including women and children, I think it was over 70% showed signs of syphilis. And yeah, dude, I was like, oh my God, that is so gross and disturbing and messed up on so many levels. And I'm pretty sure, oh yeah, oh my God, like I can't even fathom that. It's just horrifying. But it was really cool. They showed like what the bones look like and how they can tell it had syphilis because completely degrades the bone structure. And I didn't know anything about this, but history, and especially when you start to like the history of diseases, that's something I'm really becoming fascinating with, especially now that we know apparently that strains of the Black Plague has popped up in human prehistory, and we finally found signs of that. And so this thing has been our worst enemy throughout time. Especially, have you seen the stuff about the traces of it in California? Have you seen that on the news?
Like in the last century, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
As in, like, within the past couple years. It's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. And so all these people are making jokes about a modern state in the United States of America that literally has a medieval disease. But do we actually have a vaccine for the Black Plague? Because I thought that we still did not.
Well,
that'd be interesting to look up.
As far as I know, yeah, it was an immunity that was built up over generations. You know, genetic mutation, human biological evolution. But the other glandular diseases that we are able to vaccinate for, like as far as I know, which don't quote me on this, the bubonic plague is a severe glandular infection that is like a long-term result of having very low immunity to glandular infections and then being exposed to the disease in a viral way.
That's true. And I think according to one documentary that I watched, take that as it may, it wasn't by the History Channel, so hopefully it's actually accurate. But I guess there's like almost three different versions of the Black Plague that you could contract, especially in the Middle Ages. One killed you in weeks, from what I've read and from what I've researched. One killed you in days, and one could kill you in less than. They said that one would best resemble something from a zombie film. Like you're bleeding out of every single hole imaginable, your eyes, your skin is literally burning up from the inside. Like it's literally cooking your insides, and it's absolutely horrifying. Yeah, I mean, that explains some of the most twisted and jacked up art depictions that we've seen in medieval and Renaissance Europe, people painting like their thoughts on the plague and what it resembled, and all the skeletons. Like, oh, I can't even fathom that. You know, that's so crazy.
It just reminded me of this scene, I think it was in Monty Python, in the Quest for the Holy Grail, where
the Bring Out Your Dead.
Yeah.
Bring Out Your Dead. I used to have a T-shirt with that whole scene on it. Cracked me up. Even had like the little words and all that. Oh, it's so great.
There's nothing historically fictitious about that scene.
No, not at all. There's actually so many historians have actually talked about Monty Python and their ability to actually, accurately portray history. And sure, it's Monty Python. They're goofy, they're funny. But if you look at the Holy Grail, they're not far off. Even their Spanish Inquisition ploys and stuff like that. Like, you are getting a pretty accurate depiction of the Middle Ages, especially when it comes to feudalism. Yeah. I love that, and it's fascinating. Plus, it's Monty Python. I'll warn you, they are all on Netflix. And if you have not watched Monty Python, you should watch them. But I can promise you, if you are easily offended, especially if you watch the Flying Circus series, you are probably going to explode. Like, I'm not kidding. I was watching episodes of that the other day, and the fact that, oh man, they could not get away with that today. They did so many things, from cultural appropriation, making fun of people who were special needs, to literally wearing blackface. And I would like to portray like butlers and stuff like that. Oh my God. I saw an episode the other day and I looked at my wife. I was like, there ain't no way. They would be crucified if they did that today. And for obvious reasons. For one, a lot of their sketches are super racist. But at the same time, it's like you don't know if it's not necessarily that they are attacking the race they're depicting or attacking the way that British cinema portrays them at their time. And so it's so bizarre. You can read into how they do that on so many different levels or what their motivations are.
In my opinion, they're making fun of the ignorance of the perpetrators.
Oh yeah.
That's what the satire is to me. That's what I see. It's, you see all that stuff, yeah, it's very offensive, especially if you're just looking at it on the surface. But then if you remove all your lenses, the lenses I've spoken of, and just look at it completely objectively, you will see that they are basically calling the perpetrators a bunch of idiots.
Oh yeah.
And then they're on to the next scene.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, especially their jabs at like the political systems of their day. Them making fun of the royals in a variety of episodes. I mean, this is like a no-no of their day, and so it just cracks me up how ballsy these guys are, and gals. They actually have quite a few women that are also in their roles, and that's actually another thing, is how they depict women and their ability to also participate on an equal level, because they've got women main characters throughout their show, which again, giving them roles that really at the time they weren't getting. And so it's way ahead of its time, but in a way it's also at the right time, because there's no way they could get away with that crap today. Like there ain't no way they would be, oh man, just the death threats they would get would be absolutely astonishing. I mean, not to mention the online outcry.
The only place you can get away with recording stuff like that and just being completely uncensored is pretty much just Australia.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the world is just its own thing. But in Australia, they're just open and free, and they love the humor, and they're intelligent down there. And I've got a lot of respect for almost all of the comedians and musical comedians coming out of Australia. I have a ton of respect for, and I really love their work. It's very funny. It's very insightful. And there's no way in hell they'd be getting away with that anywhere else but there.
Yeah, nah. It cracks me up, man. God, I love it. I finally remembered where I was trying to go earlier when I completely lost train of thought. We were talking about kings, kingship, and theology behind divine right. I finally remember, so I'm going to get back to that real quick, because otherwise I can edit this and put it next to it, and it'll be like I never made a mistake. So anyway, what I always found fascinating about atheistic, or not even necessarily atheistic, because it's still a debate, for example, on Adolf Hitler, whether or not he was an atheist or a Protestant or what he was, because his speeches would change according to audience. And so, but not just him, but Stalin, who was, as far as we know, a very staunch atheist, even though he came from a religious background. That's one of the whole things about communism, is that it does push a belief system that is atheistic. And so I always say I critique people who kill people in the name of religion, and I critique people who kill people with in the name of a lack of religion. So that's right. There are bad atheist people, and I 100% acknowledge that. But like guys like that who did not have that background of growing up with the concept of us and we and the other, the spiritual other, the divine right, the two bodies, I've always found it fascinating how eventually they develop that complex. I always say, when it comes to Hitler, yeah, obviously he is responsible for World War II, the Holocaust, even though in many cases he had very little to do with the actual destruction, organization. That's why I differentiate him from Stalin, because Stalin, you can't find a single paper with Hitler's signature that's a kill order. It doesn't exist. If you actually find one, and this is even Dr. Childers talks about this in his great courses lectures on World War II and Nazi Germany. His lecture is called, his series is called I think it's the History of Hitler's Empire, and that's what he named it. But he goes in and talks about how you can't find a single kill order today with Hitler's signature on it. If you find it, you found the historical find of the century. Easy. Stalin, on the other hand, we have, like, you could fill volumes of orders he personally signed off on at night, writing in the margins, not enough. Like, holy crap. I mean, seriously, this is a guy who got off on systematic executing people that he specifically picked out. And so you've got these totalitarian rulers who have no background that these medieval and ancient monarchs did. They haven't been raised thinking, oh, you are the equivalents of God on earth. These guys usually come from normal backgrounds, broken families, lower class families, and you see them rise up. And so they develop a slightly different complex, usually accompanied by extreme paranoia. But what I found interesting about Stalin is Stalin becomes so obsessed with the Russian Revolution. He wants to be the father of the USSR. He knows he can't replace Lenin, but in many ways he can try to erase a ton of other people who had an impact on Russian culture, the Russian Revolution, and the USSR. And so he begins to systematically, over time, eliminate so many figures of the Russian Revolution, including no-names, like the guy that may have helped him rob a bank back in the day. So he's wanting to make sure that these people are out of the picture. That way he is the only real image of the past, of the foundation that created the Russia that they have today. The Russia that the Russia that they had then. The Russia today is still technically quite different. But although they got a guy in charge who is definitely not that different, man. Putin, that dude is old school KGB right there. Oh my God. I don't know if you've ever looked into his KGB, what we know about his past in the KGB, but I'm telling you, that is a guy who has probably murked people himself.
Yeah, not much.
Not somebody you want to cross necessarily on the political battlefield. I'm telling you, that dude, I like him at the same time because of my interest in leaders like that. But at the same time, man, that is a dude you do not want to mess with that guy ever. I feel sorry for someone in Russia who does. I mean, I'm telling you.
Back on what you were saying kind of about Stalin, and I was kind of mentioning it's very Machiavellian of him. It's giving your rivals or even your potential rivals any kind of power is a bad move. And he took that and injected it with a ton of anabolic steroids and went completely crazy on it. Oh, and I don't think that's what Machiavelli meant.
No, not at all. That's actually, I'm looking for it right now. It's a multi-volume book series written by Stephen Kotkin. It's on Stalin. I've got this one volume called Waiting for Hitler that I'm going through right now, and it discusses Stalin, his personal life, and stuff like that. It's actually really good, but I didn't know this, but he was an avid book reader, as in he had a library of, I think it was over, I don't want to say the wrong estimate, but I know it was over 10,000 books, a variety of history. And so he was known to ask people, what book are you reading? What do you think about it? What do you think about the author? And I made a joke online. I was like, I would imagine as he got older, people answered those questions way more strategically because you don't want to disagree with him or go too deep. And at the same time, you're wondering, is this a test? Why is he asking me this question? Am I going to give the wrong answer? But this guy, Stalin, had a lady executed in 24 hours for having the last cup of coffee in the office because she did not make another pot. So she's that coworker. We all know them. They drink the last cup of coffee and they don't refill it. This lady literally paid the ultimate price for having the last cup of coffee.
Stalin's the only one that actually came through on that thought that everybody has.
Literally, he literally did it. And that's what happens when you have his complex, his foundation of power. And that's also what happens when you get bored. Think about it. This guy would off people when he was bored.
Yeah, I'd hate to leave an ounce of Kool-Aid in the bottom of the Kool-Aid pitcher.
Seriously. You'd be gone. Probably less than 24 hours. He'd probably off you faster than he did the lady. Really. It's so crazy. But even the people that he did have, especially on his inner circle, what is his name? He inherits the USSR after Stalin's death. Matter of fact, before I lose track, if y'all have not seen the Netflix comedy Death of Stalin, I 100% recommend that movie. It's really intense. It's super dark, and it's also very twistedly funny. But it's also, I think it's Buscemi. He's in it as Khrushchev. Yeah, he inherits the USSR slowly through a variety of political power games after Stalin dies, and he's played by him. And the whole cast, General Zhukov, is played by the main bad guy from the Patriot movie. The one that Mel Gibson, of course, kills at the very end by shoving a bayonet through his throat.
Yeah.
Plays General Zhukov. He's actually one of the funniest characters the brief time that he's actually on screen. So it's I love it. I love it so much. But it's fascinating. Those guys who he did have on his inner circle, who had these really small, limited roles, they basically had to vote yes on pretty much everything he said because they're the committee of the Communist Party. And so it's interesting that these guys are literally playing a death game, like literally Russian roulette on the jokes that they use, the comments that they make, trying to make sure they agree with him and that's what he wanted. I mean, because, he may actually be setting you up because he wants you to disagree. And then if you agree with him, I mean, oh, you lost. Like, you lost. And this is literally a life and death game. And the movie portrays that. Like, he goes home, oh, man. Khrushchev's character, and he's literally going over old jokes on a paper with his wife. Okay, he didn't laugh at that one, mark that one off, go for this one, I'm going to try this one. So it really just shows like the fear and the stress and the anxiety that his friends that technically have survived him so far, who also represent aspects of the Russian Revolution that he hasn't cut off yet, that they go through on a daily basis. I mean, imagine working for a guy who you're also pretending to be friends with out of fear, that at any moment, due to you not liking the food that y'all had or not laughing at a certain part of an old American Western movie, you could die for that. But if you also laughed when you weren't supposed to, I mean, these guys are literally having to just go with a herd mentality of, oh my God, what should we do? While also trying to backstab each other in a really strategic and brutal game of Game of Thrones. I mean, really, like it's.
I've got some strong feedback to that, and it's more of from a historical perspective. Like, none of that behavior is new.
No, not at all.
We just don't have all that firsthand information available to us in this day and age. Like, this stuff has been happening for millennia. So if you go back and you look at, you have a hero, whoever your historical hero is. And you've got to figure, like, tyranny was far more common. All this murder and things of that nature were far more common. But we don't have records of that time the way we have records of this. And it's alarming. It is.
And a great example of that in the ancient world, if you look at Caligula's role, and let's look at his uncle, Claudius, who actually, FYI, is my favorite Roman emperor. I love Claudius.
No kidding.
He's literally, as far as I'm aware, the only Roman emperor to be declared a deity by the Celtic-speaking peoples, like, ever. And so he was very powerful, and he's also the one who really got the conquest of Britain sealed. Like, that was his thing. This guy gets underrated on so many different levels, and people look at him as he was the autistic emperor, whatever. He's kind of the clown. Eventually has his wife off because she's literally she's whoring herself around town, stuff like that. And so I really love Claudius, and the fact that he survived Caligula, honestly, even in his psychological and physical conditions. And if y'all haven't watched I, Claudius, y'all really need to, because that really portrays, it's like watching Suetonius. I mean, really. It really is. And so it's really long. It's shot like a stage, like the old school dramas used to be. I honestly can't get enough of it. But you see how he has to maneuver through, not only Augustus was an easy guy to be related to from Claudius's standpoints, and you see that as long as you didn't go too far. Tiberius, on the other hand, starts just because of his overbearing mother and just all these other issues, never being good enough, basically, especially as he gets more supposedly perverse as the older he gets and more secluded, more isolated. And then Caligula, that directly affects him. And so the fact that Claudius managed to live through 3 Caesars is, amazing. Absolutely amazing. But, of course, he never survived Nero. Obviously, we all supposedly thank Nero's mother for that. But anyway.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of respect for Claudius, and he is definitely an underrated emperor, and he's somebody that I admire. My favorite emperor is Diocletian.
Of course. Understandable. That is understandable. I would definitely put him as my second favorite, especially, Oh, absolutely. 100%. And it's like, take the persecutions of Diocletian. Really, it's oh man, what was his name? Is it Galenus?
Galerius.
Galerius, who does like really some of the most vicious persecutions of his day. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like Diocletian, to a certain extent, cares a little bit about, oh, I probably need to do this, blah, 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 blah. But the other guy is like, I'm just going for this, and we're just going to make this hardcore. I mean, really, he's like
Wait
he
till
had
you
that.
hear me get into a zone
Oh, I
on the
believe
video
it.
I do on that. I've got, I've studied this stuff for, a couple years, obviously, but now I'm really, really diving into it. And I'm just very excited to get to those different steps of this process as I go forward. And I'm definitely looking most forward to heresies
Oh, yeah.
and Diocletian.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the rest of it's all well and good, but those are just for anybody paying attention. Those are my two favorite things.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. When it comes to heresies, I'm actually going to eventually try to get Dr. Ehrman on my channel. Many of y'all are going to be familiar with this book, Misquoting Jesus. The one thing I want to actually interview him on is his book, Lost Christianities, which is going to deal with a lot of different versions of Christianity that either died out or was quite literally snuffed out through either violence or outlawing and so on and so forth. And I can't wait. That'll be fun. I'm going to put on all my charm, send him probably my best written email ever at this date, and just go for it. So, and I mean, hopefully the 30,000 subs help. So,
Yeah.
I'm so proud about that, actually. Eventually, we are going to hit 50,000 subscribers, and the fact that they've stayed with me this long is pretty much a blessing. So, I'm really, really excited about that. I enjoyed this. We need to do this more. I feel like you're a guy that this can flow with, and that we could easily discuss history together. I'm talking to Steve from the History of the Papacy podcast. We think we're going to do a whole movie where we basically just discuss war movies that we've seen or historical films, either the inaccuracies or how some of them were funny, like John Wayne playing Genghis Khan, the movie that literally gave him cancer. I mean,
my favorite historical figure is Genghis Khan.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You saw in
I
that
was wondering.
intro video?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the three tips of this flame represent the past, present, and the future. And the rest of it, if you recognize it, it's the first Mongolian unified flag of Genghis Khan. It's as long as there is a sun and a moon, there will always be a Mongol empire.
I love it. I love it. Poor Mongolia. It used to be massive, and now it's stuck between Russia and China. Like, really, it literally can't make anyone angry at this point. It's too dangerous. One thing I love about joking about Genghis Khan, especially our studies involving climate change and stuff like that, is the fact that I always joke and say he was a man who knew how to fight climate change, because his campaigns killed so many people throughout Asia that we know it actually lowered the Earth's temperature. I mean, what in the world? Like, oh, I joked around on a thread. Nobody got it. I was like, if the government says it can't fight climate change, it's lying. Genghis Khan is proof of that.
The fun fact about it is that so they say Genghis Khan wiped out so many populations that he decreased the carbon dioxide emissions in the world by 700,000 metric tons.
That's amazing. Like, oh my God. And horrifying at the same time when you see, like, one of the most successful ways to actually help the planet is by making sure there's less humans on it. Oh, it's a really terrifying thought. And it's like, oh man, that's so brutal. I mean, it was brutal times too. I really
something, man. I'm definitely going to do a series on that. My next series, I'm debating. So I want to get my skills up to a beyond acceptable level before I tackle Genghis, because he is just a hero of mine. So I don't think I'm going to do that one next, but I think next I'll do Hatshepsut.
Oh yeah.
And everything surrounding Hatshepsut in terms of the psychoanalytics of the persons she would have been around, the circumstances she was a part of, and how all that ultimately played out through as objective a lens as possible, just like I'm doing with Constantine. It's looking at all the circumstances, and it's each one of these things is almost like it's like a true to life Game of Thrones story.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's how I go about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's one thing I always found interesting about Egyptian society, especially because they're one of the few like Mediterranean societies where women supposedly have equal rights. They can divorce, inherit property, so on and so forth. until you get past the regular population. Then when you're like her and you're in the royal family, in many ways, I find that they really have less power, because when it comes to the royalty, you can tell that it's geared to where the men are really supposed to be the figureheads. And the fact that she's able to move that image, in many cases kind of portraying herself as masculine. If you I'm sure you've seen the art depictions and stuff like that. She tries to almost defeminize herself for the role.
Wearing a false beard.
And she pulls it off. I mean, 100%. And so that's absolutely fascinating.
That ties, as far as the Egyptians are concerned, like it's less of an equal rights thing than it is a mythology thing, because the pharaoh was the living
literally
horse.
Oh yeah.
Literally. So Hatshepsut, Cleopatra, even, which everybody knows who that is, Cleopatra the Seventh, Ptolemy.
Oh yeah, you know it. Antipater. I would hate to have that last name. I know that's really weird, but I just absolutely cannot stand Antipater. I don't know why. I do not know why. I'm happy to have the last name Barksdale, because I know I could have always ended up with that name. But continue. I'm so sorry.
Nothing. That's really what it came down to. It's all it is. It's just the pharaoh is a living representative of Horus, and these were intensely religious people. So it's unacceptable for there to be they didn't call them pharaohs, a king, a top ruler who was not a man, because Horus was a man. So it just comes down to that. So yeah, the fact that she is my favorite Egyptian pharaoh.
Oh yeah, understandably so.
There's a lot of them. I love a lot of them. I've spent ancient Egypt is one of my favorite topics. Ancient Rome, obviously. Ancient Greece is a little further behind those two, and then I love the Mongols. And there are many things that I love, but yeah, definitely all of ancient Egyptian history, all of Roman history, from the kings through the Republic, through the Empire, through the fall of the West, through the rise of the East, and then through the Crusades, up until about the start of the Renaissance. And that's kind of where I cap it. I kind of cap off there. So I'm like 3500 BC to about like 1250, 1300.
Oh yeah, that's understandable.
1300. So when Kublai Khan dies, like that's the end of my timeline as far as like what I really study and what I really.
That's understandable. That's a pretty good timeline too. I just heard my wife and daughter just got home, so I'm probably going to be ending this pretty quickly just so I can help them bring their stuff in. But yeah, oh, there she is. Hey, baby girl. You want to come here? Come here. Maybe? No? No, you can hear her though. But no, yeah, let's definitely do this again. You find something, baby? I told somebody I'll be down here in just a sec. I know she loves being in my library, so she can attempt to destroy my books while she has the time. So, oh man, she's so fascinated with trying to touch them because she knows that she's not supposed to. Yeah. But no, let's definitely do this again. Oh yeah, let's definitely do this again. We're definitely going to have you on this channel definitely much more in the future. I feel like this is really good. It's easy to flow with, easy to talk, and so I think this is great. Your channel's going to be awesome. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it big time, and like I agree with you. And something like my goal. I think I told you in a message, and I talked to Peter Kelly, the guy who does History Time and the Voices of the Past.
Love that guy.
And my whole goal, really, aside from like the academic part and like me, like obviously I want to teach people in person and stuff like that, but I want to so badly just be a part of the history YouTuber community.
Oh yeah,
like it's just a major goal of mine. I know it sounds a little like I don't even know what it sounds like. It sounds.
No, man, I completely understand. No, 100%. I'm the exact same way.
If I got asked
to be a part of that community,
like, you did participate in the Africa series? Did you participate?
I did. As far as I know, I created the episodes involving my little episodes on ancient and medieval Africa, but I haven't done anything with the other series they've got going on yet, though. I honestly, I probably don't even have time, even if I wanted to. I'm so booked right now.
For me, to be asked to participate in something like that with the history YouTuber community would be a great honor. I would love to provide the best work I'm able to provide with whatever content I'm assigned. And I assure you that I will be thorough and I'll put my own unique twist on it. And that's something that I would really be honored by and very motivated to do.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I promise, man. You're doing so well starting off. I don't think it'd take that long, actually. Realistically, I mean, I'm just now starting to get kind of like on the ends, and I've been doing this for 2 years, so I think you're off to a better start than I am.
I hope so. I think I got 53 subscribers now.
No,
In
that's
a
great,
week.
dude. Especially like using social media, Twitter, Instagram, stuff like that. I hate Instagram, but I'm trying to make myself use it more. That's like a key to making your channel super successful. I mean, it really, really, really is. I'm in hundreds of history groups right now, and it annoys people that are friends with me on Facebook because as soon as I start sharing to all the groups, one of them sent me a screenshot, and all you see is nothing but notifications from Nick Barksdale.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, it's you got to do what you got to do, man. But yeah, let's definitely do this again. It was a pleasure to actually meet you face to face. I know we've commented and emailed back and forth, but it's a pleasure to actually meet you per
Yeah,
se.
likewise.
And let's definitely do this again, ladies and gentlemen. The study of antiquity in the Middle Ages, and
Harry LaFontaine, World of History. Please subscribe.
absolutely same here. If y'all have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, comment below. And you know the game. Let's do it. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening.